Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week as we're getting ready to engage in a conversation specific to goals and priorities and how we set budgets and how we think about, kind of the element of how we're making decisions around money. And so that's really what we're going to focus on this week. I hope that you're enjoying the content so far, that you're finding insights and engagement, and that this week will especially be helpful for you. One of the readings this week that I think illustrates this a little bit is that Singer article where it looks at higher education finance and Medicaid spending. And basically, the idea here is that in this study in particular, that there is a trade-off between healthcare spending and spending on other priorities like higher education. But this is focused more at kind of the national and the state level. And one of the things that we find in this study is that there's no relationship found between adopting specific Medicaid expansion and higher education appropriations. And so, one of the reasons I like to start with this article is because it just reminds us that there's often trade offs, right? There are often trade offs, but not in every case. And so, sometimes as we're engaging in financial discussions, we need to think about that. What are the trade offs we're making, and how are we thinking about where we're spending our money? So this week you were able to dig a little bit into the Barr book, and you hopefully had a chance to think about what is a budget. And I love the quote that a budget is a plan for getting and spending money to reach specific goals in a specific time, right? That's what we're doing with our budget. We're trying to put our strategy into motion. We're trying to think about where our resources are going and providing incentives and controlling those finances, right? And so, if we think about our budget from that perspective and not just assigning dollars to specific categories, hopefully it helps us to make better decisions with our money. And then, of course, this week we also dug in and you had a chance to start reading the Dickinson book. And we started with this conversation that there is a need for reform, right? We are not very good at reevaluating how we're spending our money in higher education. And I think this book does a really good job of just giving you both some real world examples, but also some insights. And so one of the things that it talks about how most of the time when we talk about decreasing spending, those are short-term fixes, right? We're not actually thinking about the overarching budget or overarching goals and our purpose behind that. We also find that there's a lot of external pressure, right, when it comes to finances and setting our goals. And so we need to be thoughtful of that pressure and make sure that we have the kind of specific things in place to take care of that. I also really appreciate that the premise of this book is that academic programs drive costs, those programs can calcify, and often we aren't able to make those tough decisions that will help us to be the most successful, right? And so that's something that we really get into with this book. The second chapter that you were able to dig in a little bit is the importance of leadership, right? That leadership is needed because it's going to take time and effort and it will likely be difficult. And so I need to be in a position where I understand the budget, I have goals, I have purpose, and that will help me to be the kind of leader that I need to be. We also need to make sure that leadership is on board. This involves the leader of my unit. It involves the person that manages that unit. And sometimes it goes up to the president, the provost, and the board at times. But we need to make sure that people are on board with this kind of a change that we're going to make. Politics is everywhere. Whether you're in a public or a private, the chapter talks specifically about how there are politics for every financial decision we make. And so we have to be thoughtful of that as well. The process does take time. I think the other part of this is that one of the reasons we go through the process of reallocation for your assignment is that that's often how it starts, is we actually take the time to think about a reallocation, and then we make a decision moving forward of what we're going to keep and what we're going to change. Chapter 3 goes into specifically this idea of mission-driven budgeting. You had a chance to think about how most institutional missions are too broad. They don't actually help us to make decisions. You had an opportunity to dig into this idea that missions are constantly changing. And so we have to be thoughtful of that, or what are the underlying principles versus what are the specific words that are being said. And that often there is like a pecking order in an institution. And so we have to think again about those politics and how we are going to think about how we're going to engage in that finance. So again, I hope that you're able to enjoy this week's content. I hope that you found some wonderful insights around this idea of just getting started thinking about what are the goals and the priorities of our budget, and then how does that help us to move forward. I look forward to seeing you in the platform, and I'm excited for our upcoming Zoom call, which will be here before you know it. Thanks, everybody.